Evelyn sat at her kitchen table. The chipped would cool beneath her fingertips as she traced the grooves out of habit. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and last night's leftovers, and the flickering bulb overhead buzzed like it was tired of fighting against the dark. She stared at the stack of bills piled on the corner, each envelope unopened but heavy with its silent demand. The weight of them pressed on her chest so sharply it felt hard to breathe. She had once been full of color, dreams bursting out of her like paint on a canvas, but now she felt gray, muted, like her whole life had been drained of light. She worked part-time at a thrift shop on the edge of town, a place where old clothes and forgotten trinkets sat in dust, waiting for second chances. It paid just enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to silence the gnawing fear of what would happen when the rent came due again. At night she sketched ideas for art pieces, clothing designs, and even store fronts for a studio she had once promised herself she'd own. But every morning she tucked those dreams back into her worn notebook and returned to survival mode. Survival had become her second skin. One rainy Thursday, the store was quiet. She was rearranging boxes of books that someone had dropped off, their spines cracked and pages yellow with time. She didn't expect to find anything of value. Most of the books that came through were outdated cookbooks or old romance novels. But tucked between two hardcovers, Evelyn noticed a small, worn paperback. Its edges were frayed, and the title shimmered faintly under the dim light. The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. Something about the title pulled her in. She flipped it open, the pages falling naturally to a section that had been underlined in faded ink. Her eyes froze on the words, "Every man has a door to success, which he can open with the right word." The sentence hit her like lightning. She read it again, slower this time, as if testing each word for truth. A door to success, the right word. What did it mean? Was it a metaphor, some kind of spiritual code? Evelyn closed the book and held it against her chest, feeling a strange warmth spread through her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt as if the book had been waiting for her, buried among the forgotten, waiting for the exact moment she would stumble across it. That night, after closing the shop, she slipped the book into her bag and took it home. She sat on her bed with only the glow of a small lamp to light the words and began to read. Florence's style was simple but powerful, every sentence cutting through Evelyn's fog of despair like a blade. She spoke of affirmations, the subconscious mind, divine laws, and most of all, the idea that words carried the power to open or shut the doors of destiny. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken, as if the book wasn't just describing life in general, but was speaking directly to her. She thought about her own words, the ones she muttered to herself every day. "I'll never get ahead. I'm not good enough. Life's not fair. It's too late for me." What if those words were locking her doors shut? What if every complaint, every sigh, every defeatist sentence she had whispered in the dark had become bars on her own prison? The thought sent shivers down her spine. She kept reading until dawn, her eyes heavy but her spirit awake in a way it hadn't been in years. The phrase about the secret door lingered in her mind like a song on repeat. Every man has a door to success, which he can open with the right word. She wondered what her word was. What if it was as simple as saying something different? What if she had been holding the key all along and never knew it? The following morning, Evelyn sat with her coffee and a scrap of paper. She wrote down the phrase she had underlined and then began to experiment. She whispered softly, almost embarrassed at herself, "The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it." She paused, waiting for some dramatic sign, but the silence of her apartment answered back. Still, she repeated it, once, twice, again. Something in the words felt like they were chiseling away at the stone wall she had built inside. She didn't feel transformed overnight, but she felt a spark, a tiny flicker of possibility. At work later that day, she carried the book in her bag like a secret. Every chance she got, she pulled it out, rereading the sections about faith, words, and divine law. Florence's voice in print was both stern and gentle, like a teacher who believed too strongly in her student to let her give up. Evelyn began scribbling notes in a small notebook she carried, writing phrases like "I command abundance into my life," and "opportunities find me now." It felt awkward, even childish at first. She had been taught to work hard, to grind, to struggle. The idea that her words and thoughts could shape reality seemed absurd. And yet, hadn't her negative words shaped her current reality already? Hadn't her constant self-doubt, her spoken fears, created the very life she was drowning in? The more she thought about it, the less ridiculous it seemed. Maybe she had been living proof of the principle all along, just in reverse. That evening, as she walked home under the glow of the street lamps, she whispered the phrase again and again like a mantra. The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. Her heart felt a little lighter, her steps a little stronger. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow or the day after, but she knew one thing: something had shifted. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt like she wasn't stuck in a maze. She had found a door, and this time she held the key. Evelyn began her mornings differently now. Instead of groaning at the alarm and dragging herself through the motions of another exhausting day, she sat up in bed, clasped her hands in her lap, and whispered her words. The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. At first, her voice trembled, uncertain, almost embarrassed, but over the weeks it grew steady, calm, and sure. She would repeat it as she brushed her hair, as she poured her coffee, as she walked down the narrow sidewalk to the thrift shop. The words clung to her like armor, and slowly, imperceptibly, her world began to respond. The first sign came on a Monday morning. She was behind the counter at the thrift store when a woman walked in carrying a large bag of donations. Evelyn helped her sort through them, pulling out scarves, jackets, and paperbacks. At the bottom of the bag, she found a stack of art magazines. "You can toss those if you want," the woman said with a shrug. Evelyn flipped through them anyway, her heart beating faster with every page filled with bold designs, gallery openings, and interviews with artists. The woman paused, noticing her interest. "You know, I used to work at a gallery downtown. They're looking for someone to help with small projects, design work, organizing exhibits. Would you like me to put in a word for you?" Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Just a week ago, she had been staring at her sketchbook, whispering affirmations about new opportunities. And here it was, handed to her in a casual conversation. She smiled, trying to keep her voice steady as she answered, "Yes, I'd love that." After the woman left, Evelyn sat at the counter, staring at the magazines as if they had been placed there by the universe itself. The old Evelyn would have dismissed it as luck, a coincidence, but now she saw it for what it was, a door creaking open. That night she went home buzzing with energy. She lit a candle, opened her notebook, and wrote the affirmation over and over. The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. She added another phrase Florence had suggested: "I expect the unexpected. Doors fly open in ways beyond my imagining." As she wrote, she imagined walking through tall double doors into a gallery filled with her artwork, people admiring her designs. For the first time, it didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like rehearsal. The following days seemed to hum with synchronicity. She began noticing little nudges everywhere. At the grocery store, while standing in line, she overheard two women talking about a design expo happening in the city. She normally would have ignored it, but this time she pulled out her phone and looked it up. The tickets were expensive, more than she could spare, but she whispered, "The door to success is open." 2 days later, she found an online contest giving away free passes. Without overthinking, she entered. She won. Evelyn's confidence grew with each small victory, yet the voices of doubt weren't gone. They lurked in the corners of her mind, whispering warnings. What if this all falls apart? What if you're just setting yourself up for disappointment? Sometimes the fear pressed so hard against her chest she thought she'd crumble. But then she would open her notebook, read her words aloud, and remind herself that those thoughts belonged to the old life, the locked doors. She was walking a new path now. Her co-workers at the thrift shop noticed something different. "You're glowing lately," one of them teased. "Did you win the lottery or something?" Evelyn laughed, shaking her head, but inside she felt like she had won something even greater. She had found a treasure hidden in plain sight, the ability to command her own destiny with words. The gallery opportunity came faster than she expected. A week after meeting the woman, she received an email inviting her to interview for a part-time position helping with an upcoming exhibition. The night before the interview, Evelyn's nerves nearly consumed her. She paced her apartment, her old doubts shouting louder than ever. "You're not good enough. You don't have the right education. They'll laugh at you." For a moment, she almost canceled. Then she sat at her table, closed her eyes, and whispered, "The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. I am guided. I am ready." She repeated it until her heartbeat slowed, until the voice of doubt dimmed into silence. The next day, she walked into the gallery. The high ceilings, the white walls, the soft track lights illuminating the artwork, all of it felt like stepping into another world. She sat across from the gallery director, her palms sweaty but her posture upright. When asked about her experience, she spoke with honesty. "I may not have formal training, but I have vision. I see art as a language, a way of telling stories, and I want to help share those stories." The director studied her, then smiled. "I like your energy. We'll give you a trial run." Evelyn left the building trembling with a mix of fear and joy. On the bus ride home, she pressed her forehead against the window, tears stinging her eyes. Just weeks ago, she had been suffocating under the weight of unpaid bills and hopelessness. Now she was walking into new rooms, new doors, guided by words she had once thought were too simple to matter. As the days passed, the changes rippled outward. She found herself carrying herself differently, shoulders back, eyes brighter. When she spoke, she no longer apologized for her presence. She wasn't begging life for scraps anymore. She was claiming her place at the table. People began noticing. A stranger at the cafe struck up a conversation about her sketches. A colleague at the gallery asked if she had ever considered submitting her designs to an upcoming showcase. Each time, Evelyn felt the door widening, light pouring in. One evening, she sat at her desk with her notebook open, the candle flickering beside her. She thought about the old Evelyn, the one who had drowned in fear, who thought life was a locked maze with no exit. She wanted to reach back and tell that version of herself that the key had been there all along, hidden in her words, waiting for her to use it. She whispered into the quiet, "The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. I am walking through." And for the first time in her life, she knew she wasn't just saying it. She was living it. Months had passed since Evelyn first whispered those words in her tiny apartment, trembling with doubt yet clinging to hope. Now, standing in the middle of a bustling gallery opening, she barely recognized herself. The once timid woman who had feared taking chances was gone. She wore a flowing emerald dress, her hair pinned elegantly, her sketchbook transformed into framed artwork on the walls. Guests, leaned in close to admire her designs, bold, symbolic, alive with color. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and music hummed softly in the background. Yet the loudest sound in Evelyn's mind was the quiet echo of her mantra: "The door to success is open. Nothing can shut it." She remembered the moment her director first asked her to submit a piece. Her instinct had been to refuse, to shrink back. But something inside her pushed forward the part of her that had been rewired by Florence Scovel Shinn's wisdom. She stayed up nights sketching, painting, revising, pouring her soul onto the canvas. When the work was accepted into the showcase, she cried harder than she had in years. Now, seeing strangers nod with admiration as they looked at her art, she felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. As she circulated through the crowd, she overheard snippets of conversation. "This one feels so raw, so alive," a man said, pointing to her piece that depicted a golden door breaking open into a sunrise. Another whispered, "Who is she? Where did she come from?" Evelyn smiled softly, because she knew the answer. She had come from the ashes of her old self, rebuilt by words. Later that night, as the event wound down, she stepped outside into the cool air. The city lights shimmered like jewels, and she breathed deeply, feeling both grounded and limitless. She thought back to her old life in the thrift shop, to the bills piled high, to the hopelessness that had once kept her awake at night. It felt like a lifetime ago. What astonished her most was not the external success, but the inner freedom. She was no longer trapped by invisible walls. She had found the secret door Florence had spoken of, and she had walked through it. But Evelyn's story didn't end with her alone. Something inside her knew she couldn't keep this discovery to herself. She began journaling not just her affirmations, but her journey, the doubts, the breakthroughs, the small miracles. At first, she kept them private, but eventually, she felt compelled to share. One evening, she recorded a short video on her phone, her voice shaky at first but growing steady as she spoke. "For years, I thought life had locked me out of everything I wanted. But then I found words that opened doors. I want you to know. You have the same key." She uploaded it, expecting nothing. To her surprise, messages began pouring in. People thanked her for her honesty, told her they had been struggling with the same invisible chains. One woman wrote, "I said the words you shared before going to a job interview, and for the first time I felt calm. I actually got the job." Evelyn realized then that her story wasn't just hers. It was a seed meant to grow in others. Weeks later, she was invited to speak at a small community event. She stood in front of a group of women and men who carried the same heaviness she once had. Their shoulders slumped, their eyes tired. She told them about her journey, about the thrift shop, about the gallery. She taught them the simple phrases that had changed everything. "Your subconscious has been trained to see walls where doors actually exist," she said gently. "But when you speak words of truth, those doors swing open." The room was silent, the kind of silence that meant people were listening not just with their ears, but with their souls. Afterward, several approached her, tears in their eyes. One man admitted he had been on the verge of giving up his dream of starting a business. "I'm going to try this," he said firmly. Evelyn touched his shoulder and replied, "Don't just try, declare it." Her life became a ripple effect. She still created her art, still cherished her nights sketching by candlelight, but she also became a guide for others. People began calling her not just an artist, but a teacher, a light bearer. Each message she received, each story of breakthrough, felt like confirmation that this was bigger than her. One night, she sat at her desk, rereading a passage from Florence Scovel Shinn's writings. "Every man is a golden link in the chain of my good." The words struck her differently this time. She realized she had become part of that chain for others, just as Florence had been for her. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for the door, for the key, for the chance to pass it on." Her apartment was different now, filled with plants, sunlight, stacks of sketchbooks, and letters from people who had been touched by her words. But she never forgot the feeling of sitting in the dark, fearing life would never change. She kept one of her earliest affirmations framed on her wall as a reminder: the door to success is open. Nothing can shut it. Months later, when she was invited to speak at a larger conference, Evelyn stood backstage, hands trembling slightly. The old nerves returned, but this time she knew how to calm them. She whispered her command. She walked onto the stage to a sea of faces waiting, hungry for hope. And she told them the truth, that success is not reserved for the chosen few, that the universe listens to the voice of belief, that the words we choose shape the doors we walk through. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Evelyn felt tears blur her vision. She thought of the girl who had once whispered those words alone in her dim apartment. That girl had been the seed. This woman on the stage was the bloom, and beyond her, countless others were planting seeds of their own. The secret door was no longer a mystery. It had become a movement, and Evelyn knew, deep in her soul, that it had only just begun.